The gavel echoed through the dead-silent courtroom, sealing what everyone thought was just another open and shut case. 2 smirking patrol officers had just perjured themselves to put an innocent man behind bars. But they had no idea the man in shackles wasn't a desperate criminal. He was a federal agent. The rain was coming down in sheets, slicking the asphalt of Westbridge's industrial district into a black mirror. It was 2:15 a.m. on a Tuesday, the kind of hour when the only people still awake were those running from the law and those paid to chase them. Special Agent Derek Hayes belonged to the latter, though looking at him, you'd never guess it. Derek was 34, exhausted, and running on nothing but cheap diner coffee and adrenaline. For the past 11 months, he had been deep undercover, infiltrating a mid-level narcotics syndicate operating out of Pennsylvania. To the streets, he was Darnell, a quiet, efficient logistics guy who moved product in a beat-up 2014 Chevy Malibu. To the Federal Bureau of Investigation, he was the linchpin in Operation Iron Grip, a multi-agency task force about to bring down a syndicate that spanned 3 states. He was 3 blocks away from his safe house when the flashing red and blue lights illuminated his rearview mirror. Derek sighed, easing his foot off the gas and pulling the Malibu over to the cracked curb. He checked his speedometer. He was doing exactly the 25 miles per hour speed limit. His blinker was on. His registration under his alias was up to date. There was absolutely no reason for a traffic stop. But as he glanced in the side mirror and saw the silhouette of a Westbridge police cruiser, a familiar, sinking realization settled in his gut. 2 officers stepped out into the freezing rain. Officer Thomas Riley and Officer Gregory Dunn. They were notorious in the 11th Precinct, a pair of patrolmen who treated the city's poorer neighborhoods like their own personal hunting grounds. Derek had read their files during a broader corruption sweep assessment years ago. They were known for excessive force, dubious arrests, and miraculous drug busts that always seemed to happen when their body cameras conveniently malfunctioned. "Keep your hands on the wheel, Darnell," Derek muttered to himself, slipping into his undercover persona. Officer Riley approached the driver's side, shining a high-powered tactical flashlight directly into Derek's eyes, blinding him. Officer Dunn hung back near the passenger-side rear quarter panel, his hand resting casually on the butt of his holstered service weapon. "Window down. All the way." Riley barked, his voice dripping with unwarranted hostility. Derek complied, the electric motor whining as the glass lowered, letting in the freezing rain. "Evening, officer. Was I speeding? License, registration, and proof of insurance. Don't make any sudden movements, boy," Riley commanded, completely ignoring the question. Derek felt a muscle jump in his jaw at the disrespect, but he kept his face impassive. He moved his hands slowly, deliberately. "It's in the glove compartment. I'm going to reach for it now." "I didn't ask for a narration. Just get it," Riley snapped. Derek retrieved the forged documents and handed them over. Riley barely glanced at them before shining the light throughout the interior of the Malibu. There was nothing to see. Fast food wrappers, an empty coffee cup, and the smell of stale air. "Step out of the vehicle," Riley ordered. "Officer, why did you pull me over?" Derek asked, his tone level, devoid of the panic Riley was clearly hoping to provoke. "Broken tail light. Now step out of the vehicle before I drag you out." Derek knew his tail lights were perfect. He had checked the car himself 4 hours ago, but arguing on the side of a dark road with 2 adrenaline junkie cops was a losing game. He unbuckled his seatbelt, pushed the door open, and stepped out into the biting cold. Before his feet were fully planted, Dunn moved in from the passenger side, grabbing Derek by the shoulder and slamming him chest first against the wet hood of the Malibu. The metal was freezing. "Hey, I'm not resisting," Derek said sharply, keeping his hands flat on the hood where they could be seen. "Shut your mouth," Dunn yelled aggressively, patting down Derek's sides, kicking his legs apart. "Riley, check the car." Derek turned his head, slightly watching, as Riley leaned into the Malibu. He didn't just look. He began tearing the interior apart. He ripped the contents of the glove box onto the floorboards, pulled the floor mats up, and violently shoved his hands under the driver's seat. Derek's mind raced. In a hidden magnetized lockbox welded behind the dashboard was his FBI badge, his encrypted federal comms device, and his real identification. If Riley found that box, Operation Iron Grip was dead. The syndicate had eyes everywhere, and a rumor of a Fed getting pinched in Westbridge would reach the cartel boss by morning. Derek would be burned, months of work destroyed, and his informants would be slaughtered. But Riley didn't find the lockbox. Instead, Riley emerged from the car holding up a clear plastic baggie containing 2 ounces of white, crystalline powder. Methamphetamine. "Well, well, well," Riley sneered, holding the baggie up to the streetlight. "Look what we have here done. Looks like our boy here is trafficking." Derek stared at the bag. It wasn't his. It was a classic drop. Riley had palmed it from his own tactical vest when he leaned into the car. "That's not mine," Derek said, his voice deadly calm. "You planted that." Dunn grabbed Derek's wrist, violently twisting it behind his back and slapping on a pair of steel handcuffs. They were painfully tight, biting into the bone. "Save it for the judge, scumbag. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you start using it." As they shoved him into the back of the cruiser, Derek made a calculated choice. He could shout that he was a federal agent. He could demand they call his special agent in charge, Robert Lawson. It would stop the arrest immediately, but it would also generate a local police report, a paper trail that the cartel's moles inside the precinct would inevitably see. His cover would be blown, or he could take the ride. He could let these dirty cops process Darnell post-bail and then completely dismantle them in court where it mattered all without compromising his task force's timeline. Derek leaned back against the hard plastic seat of the cruiser as it sped toward the precinct. "You boys picked the wrong car tonight," he thought, watching the city lights blur through the rain-streaked window. "I'm going to let you dig your own graves." 3 months later. The heavy oak doors of courtroom 402 in the Westbridge Municipal Courthouse swung open, letting in a draft of stale hallway air. Derek sat at the defense table, wearing a crisp, understated charcoal suit. He looked entirely different from the street-level courier he had played the night of his arrest. Beside him sat Samuel Jenkins, a notoriously overworked public defender whose tie was crooked and whose briefcase looked like it had survived a war zone. Jenkins was sweating profusely nervously, flipping through a manila folder that contained Derek's fabricated arrest record. "Look, Darnell, I'm telling you," Jenkins whispered, frantically leaning in close. "ADA Wallace doesn't lose. He's offering a plea. 2 years probation, a felony mark on your record, and you walk out of here today. If we take this to trial, you're looking at a mandatory minimum of 5 years in state prison. The cops found the drugs in your car. It's their word against yours, and juries in this county love cops." Derek didn't look at Jenkins. His eyes were fixed on Assistant District Attorney Richard Wallace, a slick, arrogant prosecutor who was currently laughing at a joke made by Officer Riley near the prosecution table. Riley was in full dress uniform, his brass, polished-looking, every bit the pristine guardian of the community. Officer Dunn sat in the gallery smirking. "I'm not taking a plea, Sam," Derek said quietly. "I'm entirely innocent." "Innocence doesn't matter in room 402, Jenkins hissed. "Evidence matters. They have the drugs, Darnell. They planted them." "Tah, you think Judge Carmichael cares? You think she hasn't heard that 1,000 times this year?" Before Derek could respond, the bailiff shouted, "All rise." Judge Evelyn Carmichael took the bench. She was a stern, uncompromising woman with a reputation for mercilessly clearing her docket. She peered over her reading glasses, looking down at the courtroom with a mix of authority and utter exhaustion. "Be seated," Judge Carmichael ordered, shuffling some papers. "State of Pennsylvania versus Darnell Hughes. Possession with intent to distribute. Mr. Wallace, is the state ready?" "Ready, Your Honor," Wallace said, standing up and buttoning his expensive navy suit. "Mr. Jenkins, how does your client plead?" Derek stood up before Jenkins could open his mouth. "Not guilty, Your Honor, and if it pleases the court, I would like to dismiss my appointed counsel and proceed pro se." The courtroom went dead silent. Jenkins looked like he was about to have a heart attack. Ada Wallace let out a loud, mocking scoff. Judge Carmichael narrowed her eyes. "Mr. Hughes, you are facing serious felony charges. Proceeding without legal representation is highly ill-advised. You are not a lawyer." "I understand the risks, Your Honor," Derek said smoothly, his posture perfect, his voice projecting clearly across the room. "I waive my right to counsel. I will be representing myself." Carmichael stared at him for a long moment. There was something in Derek's demeanor, a lack of fear, a composed precision that didn't align with the file sitting in front of her. "Very well. It's your funeral. Mr. Wallace, call your first witness." "The state calls Officer Thomas Riley," Wallace announced triumphantly. Riley swaggered up to the witness stand, placing his hand on the Bible, and swearing to tell the whole truth. He settled into the chair, adjusting his microphone with practiced ease. He had done this 100 times. Wallace approached the podium. "Officer Riley, can you recount the events of October 12th? "Certainly," Riley said, looking respectfully at the jury box, playing his part to perfection. "My partner and I observed the defendant driving erratically on 4th Street. He was swerving over the yellow line. We initiated a traffic stop for a broken tail light and suspected DUI. When I approached the vehicle, the defendant was hostile, aggressive, and refused to comply with basic commands." "Did you conduct a search of the vehicle?" Wallace asked. "Yes. For officer safety, we asked him to step out. When he did, I illuminated the interior of his car and saw in plain view, protruding from under the driver's seat, a large plastic bag containing a crystalline substance later confirmed to be methamphetamine." "In plain view," Wallace emphasized for the record. "Yes, sir. Plain view. The defendant then became physically combative, and we had to subdue him to effect the arrest." "Thank you, officer." "No further questions," Wallace said, strutting back to his table. He shot Derek a pitying look. Judge Carmichael looked down at Derek. "Mr. Hughes, you may cross-examine the witness." Derek stood up slowly. He didn't carry any notes. He didn't stumble. He walked to the center of the floor and looked directly into Thomas Riley's eyes. For a fraction of a second, Riley's confident smirk faltered. "Officer Riley," Derek began, his voice calm, ringing with authority. "You testified that my driving was erratic, correct?" "That is correct," Riley said. "And you pulled me over for a broken tail light?" "Yes." "Officer Riley, isn't it true that a 2014 Chevy Malibu's taillight assembly is a single integrated LED unit? If the taillight were broken, the brake light and turn signal would also fail to illuminate." Riley frowned. "I don't know the exact mechanics of your car, Darnell. I just know it was out." "I see. You also testified that I was hostile and combative, which prompted you to search the vehicle." Derek paced a few steps to the right. Westbridge Police Department policy mandates that all patrol vehicles have their dashboard cameras activated during a traffic stop. "Do you have the footage of my erratic driving and combative behavior?" Riley cleared his throat. "Unfortunately, the dash cam in our cruiser experienced a technical malfunction," That evening. A malfunction, Derek repeated, letting the word hang in the air. How unfortunate. What about your body-worn camera? Department policy dictates it must be active during all civilian engagements. Riley shifted uncomfortably in his seat. My battery died earlier in my shift. My partner's camera was also malfunctioning due to the heavy rain. So both cameras, the dash cam and the evidence that could corroborate your story, completely failed on this specific night at this specific time. Objection, Wallace shouted, standing up. Argumentative. Sustained. Judge Carmichael said, though she was now looking at Officer Riley with intense, critical scrutiny. Move on, Mr. Hughes. Gladly, Your Honor, Derek said. He took a step closer to the witness stand. Officer Riley, you swore under oath today that you found the narcotics in plain view, protruding from under the seat. That's right. I saw it plain as day. You are absolutely certain, under penalty of perjury, you swear that you didn't plant those drugs. You swear that you didn't violate my civil rights. Riley leaned forward, his face flushing with anger. Listen to me, Darnell. I know what I saw. You're a drug dealer. We found your stash. I didn't plant anything, and I don't appreciate a criminal trying to drag my name through the mud in this courtroom. I just want to be absolutely clear. Officer. Derek pressed his voice, dropping an octave, losing any trace of the street persona he had been wearing for months. The tone was pure authoritative federal law enforcement. You are locking in your testimony, right here, right now. I am... Riley spat. Derek turned his back on Riley and looked at the judge. The trap was fully sprung. Every lie was on the official court record. Your Honor, Derek said softly, reaching into the inner pocket of his tailored suit jacket. The defense would like to enter a new piece of evidence into the record, and I believe the prosecution is going to want to amend their charges. Wallace laughed out loud. Objection. What is this nonsense? He's a pro se defendant, trying to introduce surprise evidence. Derek pulled a sleek black leather wallet from his pocket. He didn't open it immediately. He looked at Officer Riley, who was now staring at the wallet with a sudden, inexplicable sense of dread creeping up his spine. It's not surprise evidence, Mr. Wallace, Derek said. He flipped the leather wallet open and held it up high for the entire courtroom to see. The fluorescent lights caught the gleam of the solid gold shield and the crisp federal ID card opposite it. My name is not Darnell Hughes, Derek announced, his voice echoing off the wood-paneled walls. I am Special Agent Derek Hayes with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and Officer Riley just committed federal perjury in your courtroom. The silence in courtroom 402 was absolute, heavy and suffocating. It was the kind of quiet that precedes a catastrophic explosion. For 5 agonizing seconds, nobody moved. Judge Evelyn Carmichael froze her pen, hovering millimeters above her legal pad. Ada Richard Wallace's mocking smile slowly dissolved, replaced by a slack-jawed expression of sheer incomprehension. In the gallery, Officer Gregory Dunn sat up rigid, the color draining entirely from his face as his eyes locked onto the solid gold FBI shield catching the fluorescent lights. But it was Officer Thomas Riley on the witness stand who looked like he had just been handed a death sentence. His arrogant swagger evaporated. A thick bead of sweat materialized at his temple, tracing a jagged line down his pale cheek. What is this? Wallace finally stammered, his voice cracking entirely devoid of its previous theatrical confidence. Your Honor, this is a forgery. It has to be a stunt. He's a street-level drug runner. Approach the bench. Judge Carmichael commanded, her voice slicing through the tension like a scalpel. Now, both of you. Derek snapped the leather wallet shut and walked calmly toward the judge's bench. Wallace scrambled after him, nearly tripping over the edge of the prosecution table in his panic. Derek handed his federal credentials up to the judge. Carmichael pulled her reading glasses down the bridge of her nose, scrutinizing the holographic watermark, the embedded microchip, and the unmistakable seal of the Department of Justice. Special Agent Derek Hayes. Carmichael read aloud, her voice carrying a dangerous edge. She looked down at Derek. You have been operating under the alias Darnell Hughes. Yes, Your Honor. Derek replied, his tone respectful but firm. For the past 11 months, I have been the lead undercover operative in a joint federal task force, Operation Iron Grip, targeting the distribution networks of a tri-state narcotics syndicate. My arrest by Officers Riley and Dunn was an unanticipated complication, but one we decided to utilize to our advantage. Utilize? Wallace hissed his face, turning a blotchy red. You wasted the court's time. You intentionally allowed a fraudulent prosecution to proceed to trial. I allowed corrupt police officers to perjure themselves under oath, Derek corrected sharply, turning his gaze to Wallace. Officers who, according to our ongoing intelligence, are on the payroll of the very cartel my task force is attempting to dismantle. A collective gasp echoed from the gallery. Jenkins, the public defender, had slumped back into his chair, staring at the ceiling as if he had just witnessed a miracle. Judge Carmichael slammed her gavel down, silencing the rising murmurs. She glared at the witness stand. Officer Riley, you are still under oath. I suggest you think very, very carefully about your next words. Riley was hyperventilating his hands, gripping the wooden railing of the witness box, so tightly his knuckles were bone white. I want union representation. He choked out his eyes, darting frantically toward the courtroom exit. I plead the Fifth. It's a little late for the Fifth Amendment, Thomas, Derek said, stepping back to the center of the room. Especially when you've already locked in your testimony. But you shouldn't worry about the lack of body camera footage from that night. I brought my own. Derek reached into his briefcase and produced a sleek, black, encrypted flash drive. Your Honor, the 2014 Chevy Malibu I was driving is a Federal Fleet vehicle, Derek explained to the court. It is equipped with military-grade covert audio and visual recording devices. 2 4K pinhole cameras are mounted in the rearview mirror and the dashboard air vents. High-fidelity microphones are embedded in the headliner. Derek handed the drive to the court bailiff. On this drive is the raw, unedited footage of the traffic stop on October 12th. It clearly shows Officer Riley reaching into his tactical vest, producing a baggie of methamphetamine, and tossing it onto the floorboard of my vehicle, before falsely declaring it was in plain view. Riley lunged out of the witness chair, panic entirely overriding his logic. This is a setup. That's illegal surveillance. Sit down, Carmichael roared, her fury absolute. Bailiff, secure the witness. 2 armed court officers immediately stepped forward, placing their hands heavily on Riley's shoulders and forcing him back into the wooden chair. In the gallery, Officer Dunn stood up and tried to quietly shuffle toward the heavy oak doors, desperate to escape. I wouldn't do that, Greg, Derek called out, not even turning around to look at him, unless you want to add resisting a federal arrest to your list of charges. Right on cue, the heavy oak doors of courtroom 402 burst open. The courtroom was instantly swarmed. 6 men and women in dark windbreakers, emblazoned with the bright yellow letters FBI, flooded the aisles, moving with tactical practiced precision. Leading the charge was Special Agent in Charge Robert Lawson, a grizzled, no-nonsense veteran of the Bureau who looked like he had spent his entire career chewing on nails. Federal agents, nobody moves. Lawson's voice boomed, drowning out the panicked murmurs of the jury. 2 agents bypassed the prosecution table and immediately flanked Officer Dunn in the gallery, kicking his legs apart and slapping federal steel around his wrists. Dunn didn't fight back. He just dropped his head in defeat. Lawson walked straight past the trembling ADA Wallace and approached the bench, flashing his credentials to Judge Carmichael. Special Agent in Charge Robert Lawson, FBI. Your Honor, I apologize for the interruption of your proceedings, but we have federal arrest warrants for several individuals in this room. I am more than happy to accommodate you, Agent Lawson. Judge Carmichael said, her eyes blazing with righteous anger as she stared daggers at Riley. It seems my courtroom has been used as a stage for a criminal conspiracy. It goes much deeper than perjury, Your Honor, Derek said, stepping forward to stand shoulder to shoulder with his commanding officer. The methamphetamine that Officer Riley planted in my vehicle. We ran a chemical analysis and cross-referenced its batch signature. It wasn't just random street product. It was part of a 50-pound seizure made by the Westbridge Police Department 2 years ago. Wallace's eyes widened in horror. That's impossible. That evidence is locked in the 11th Precinct's secure vault. Not anymore, Lawson said grimly. We audited the 11th Precinct's evidence logs this morning while this trial was commencing. The drugs Riley planted were smuggled out of the precinct's evidence locker, and there's only one man with the administrative clearance to override those security protocols without triggering an alert. Derek turned to look at the defeated handcuffed patrolman. Captain William Prescott, your commanding officer. Riley squeezed his eyes shut, a pathetic whimper escaping his throat. The entire criminal pipeline was laid bare. Captain Prescott had been stealing confiscated cartel drugs, and his dirty patrolmen Riley and Dunn were putting them back on the street, occasionally using them to frame innocent civilians to meet their arrest quotas and keep the heat off the real cartel operatives. We arrested Captain Prescott 20 minutes ago in his driveway, Lawson announced to the stunned courtroom. Officers Thomas Riley and Gregory Dunn, you are under arrest for conspiracy to distribute narcotics deprivation of rights under color of law, federal perjury, and obstruction of justice. The FBI agents dragged Riley out of the witness box. He didn't strut this time. His polished brass uniform suddenly looked like a clown costume. As the agents marched the disgraced cops down the center aisle, the silence of the courtroom was replaced by the heavy, satisfying clatter of chains. Derek turned to Ada Wallace, who was clutching his briefcase like a life preserver. I suggest you review your caseload, Mr. Wallace. Every single arrest Riley and Dunn have made over the last 5 years is about to be federally audited. If we find out you willfully ignored their corruption to boost your conviction rate, we'll be seeing you again very soon. Wallace swallowed hard, utterly speechless, his career flashing before his eyes. Case dismissed with extreme prejudice, Judge Carmichael declared, slamming her gavel down with such force it echoed like a gunshot. Mr. Hughes, or rather Agent Hayes, the court thanks you for your service. Derek nodded respectfully to the judge. He walked over to the defense table, picked up his charcoal suit jacket, and slipped it on. Jenkins, the public defender, was still staring at him in awe. I told you I wasn't taking the plea, Sam, Derek said, with a faint, knowing smile. Derek Hayes walked out of the courtroom, the heavy oak doors swinging shut behind him. The air in the hallway was no longer stale. It felt clear, sharp, and clean. The syndicate was crumbling, the corrupt brass was in chains, and the streets of Westbridge were finally about to see some real justice. If this story of absolute justice and a flawless undercover sting kept you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button. Corruption thrives in the dark, but it only takes one person to shine a light and bring the whole system crashing down.